Part 1. The Arrival of the Humans. I was there when the humans first walked into the Grand Hall of the Galactic Council. It was an event I had anticipated, for I had seen countless species make their debuts in that magnificent chamber, a place designed to evoke awe and grandeur. The ceiling arched high above us, composed of refracting crystal that shimmered like a vast rainbow, casting ever-shifting arcs of color across the smooth, reflective floor. The air itself seemed alive, humming with the energy fields that powered the hall's atmosphere. Bioluminescent patterns danced across the walls, glowing softly in the low light, while deep resonating sounds vibrated gently through the structure, creating an atmosphere of unity, as if the very building was alive, symbolizing the harmony of the millions of worlds represented there. Every species that had ever entered the hall before had always arrived with a sense of importance, displaying their power and unique traits with great pride. The Kylox arrived in ships that seemed to pulse with a life of their own, their biomechanical designs awe-inspiring. The Silthar floated in with their ethereal grace, their ships sleek and shimmering as if they were woven from starlight itself. Even the Zyans, massive and formidable in stature, commanded attention with their grounded power and energy shields, which hummed in deep resonance around their forms. There was an unspoken competition in the air whenever new species entered, a display of who could awe the council most, a demonstration of evolutionary brilliance and technological prowess. But when the humans entered, something different happened. The murmurs started immediately. The council delegates exchanged looks, subtle, yet filled with curiosity. The humans, by most species standards, were tall, but not unusually so. Their bodies were humanoid, awkwardly so, compared to the other galactic species. The way they walked, though steady and purposeful, lacked the fluid grace of the Silthar or the solid, unshakable power of the Zyans. Their movements seemed almost stiff in comparison, as if they hadn't quite mastered the elegance expected of intergalactic dignitaries. What struck me most, though, was their simplicity. As they walked into the Grand Hall, there was no shimmering energy shield, no bio-enhanced armor, no glowing tattoos or reflective exoskeletons. They were exposed, vulnerable, some might have said. They wore clothes made from synthetic fibers, basic and utilitarian, fabrics that would offer little to no protection against even minor physical threats. Their skin was soft, unshielded, and their faces lacked the calm, impassive expressions of other species accustomed to political diplomacy. Yet, despite all of this, there was something undeniably different about them. Their very presence conveyed an aura of confidence, not born of arrogance, but of something far more peculiar: resilience. They didn't enter the hall with the usual theatrical displays of strength or advanced weaponry, which were the usual fare for most species seeking favor or respect. No, the humans came quietly, their steps measured, unassuming. No weapons at their hips, no shields around their bodies, and yet they walked with an air of peculiar confidence, one that made them stand apart. It wasn't the typical bravado of a species trying to prove their superiority. It was as though the very simplicity of their being conveyed a deeper strength, one that didn't need to be shown with embellishments or technological displays. They simply were. I watched as they made their way to the section reserved for observer species, those who had no particular stake in the council's discussions, but were nonetheless granted a seat to watch and learn. The usual observers often made attempts to get noticed, to show some form of relevance to the greater galactic community, but not the humans. They sat down, eyes scanning the chamber, and for a moment it felt as if they were not participating in the theater of intergalactic politics at all. I leaned toward the delegate beside me, a Thalas whose energy-shielded carapace shimmered with faint orange light, and whispered, "They seem underwhelming, don't they?" The Thalas flicked one of their sensory tendrils dismissively, the movement a sharp gesture. Soft skins not long for the galactic stage, I'd wager, probably relying on their technology, but we'll see, nothing to be concerned about. Yet, as the humans settled into their seats, I couldn't help but notice something I couldn't quite explain, an almost unsettling stillness about them. While other species fidgeted in their seats, adjusting their energy shields or communicating with their distant homeworlds, the humans were calm. They didn't seem to feel the need to make their presence known. Instead, They simply were, their quiet presence permeating the hall like an undercurrent that no one could quite place. I had seen their ships when they arrived, simple, functional, unadorned, in a galaxy filled with ships that seemed to be extensions of their pilot's will, flowing seamlessly between space and time. The human vessels were strangely utilitarian. No elegant curves or graceful organic shapes like the Silthar ships. No dazzling crystalline structures like the Zion crafts, just angular, stark, and functional. They looked like ships built for purpose, not for beauty or prestige. If the humans were relying on technology, it wasn't the kind that made an immediate impression. It didn't possess the awe-inspiring, near-magical elegance of other galactic creations. But there was something about it that intrigued me. Perhaps it was the efficiency of their design. Or perhaps I was starting to feel what I couldn't yet put into words. These humans, these seemingly simple beings, had something else. Something deeper. Soft skins, you say? I whispered under my breath, glancing over at the Thalas, whose dismissive attitude toward the humans was clear. Perhaps. But what if their strength isn't in their appearance? What if it's something more? The Thalas didn't respond, their tendrils curling slightly in irritation, but I could see that something in the humans' unassuming demeanor had struck a chord with them, even if they refused to admit it. In a hall filled with grandiose displays of power, the humans stood as an anomaly, quiet, unadorned, and yet there was a feeling that their presence might, in time, become something more than just an observation, something that would make the galaxy take notice. Little did any of us know that this simple, seemingly insignificant entry would mark the beginning of a series of events that would reshape the very foundation of the Galactic Council. Part 2. The quiet strength of the humans. When their representative, Ambassador Thorn, rose to speak, the murmurs of the council chambers slowly died. It wasn't because of any commanding presence. Thorn's voice, calm and steady, was neither deep nor authoritative, and it carried no particularly powerful tone. But there was something about the way they held themselves, the way they carried their words, that made the room fall silent. In that moment, the usual cacophony of whispers, conversations, and half-hearted debates ceased. Even the hum of the energy field seemed to quiet, as if the building itself was listening. It wasn't Thorn's voice that commanded the attention. It was their very essence, their calm certainty, their presence. It was a stillness that had the power to draw the gaze of every delegate, from the most grandiose to the most humble. "We are here to observe," Thorn said simply. That was it, no flourishes. No complicated explanations, no formal introductions or verbose declarations of importance. The simplicity of their words cut through the air like a blade, sending a ripple through the room. The delegates exchanged confused glances. In a chamber where introductions were typically grandiose and filled with hidden motivations, this was a stark contrast. Observer species, after all, rarely came with such directness. They usually arrived with long-winded speeches about their aspirations, their gratitude for being included in the council's discussions, or their desire to forge new alliances. Some attempted to showcase their strength, others sought approval or demanded recognition. But never had anyone so plainly stated their intentions with such clarity, just to observe. Ambassador Thorn didn't try to make their presence known in any grand way. They didn't try to convince anyone of the humans' worth or importance. They were merely there, and their simple statement carried more weight than any boast could have. The Zion delegate, whose crystalline form pulsed with faint amusement, leaned forward slightly, their glowing body casting strange patterns of light. "Observe? You've come all this way just to watch?" Thorn's reply came without hesitation. "Yes," they said, "for now." There was no arrogance in Thorn's voice, no defensiveness, just an unwavering certainty. It wasn't a challenge, nor an invitation for further discussion. It was merely a statement of fact, one that, in its simplicity, left the council delegates unsettled. It was the understatement that spoke volumes. The council, as expected, dismissed the humans with a brief flick of their collective attention. It wasn't out of disrespect, but rather the indifference usually afforded to those deemed unimportant or irrelevant. Observer species were usually little more than passive participants in the great politics of the galaxy, quietly watching as the true powers debated and negotiated, contributing little, but observing everything. But as the humans returned to their seats, still and silent, I couldn't help but feel something shift. Their stillness wasn't passivity, it was something more profound. The humans didn't need to announce their strength, flaunt their technologies, or boast of their capabilities. Their calm, patient demeanor struck me with the intensity of a predator poised for the right moment to strike. It was a quiet strength, one that required no boasting, no display, just waiting, watching, gathering information. And that, I realized, was perhaps their greatest power, this ability to sit in silence, to observe, to understand without ever needing to raise their voice. Part 3. The incident that changed everything. The first real incident that changed everything came quietly, almost unnoticed, amid the endless debates of the Galactic Council. A minor dispute, hardly worth registering in the grand scheme of interstellar politics. The aquatic eel and the insectoid varan had been quarreling for decades over a resource moon in a binary system, located on the fringe of their territories. It wasn't the first time they'd clashed over this issue, and it likely wouldn't be the last. The resource moon was small but vital, its minerals critical to both species' survival, and tensions between the eel and the varan had escalated over time. Normally, when such disputes arose, they were handled through the established council mediation process. It was a system steeped in centuries of tradition, a process that involved a great deal of ceremony, where each side argued their case in meticulous detail, sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks. At the end of the process, the council would work out a compromise that satisfied no one but left the situation in a state of uneasy peace. This time, however, something unexpected happened. The humans were invited to observe the mediation process. It wasn't because anyone thought they could offer something of value. They were, after all, newcomers. The council's intention was clear: include the humans, allow them to see how galactic diplomacy worked in practice, and perhaps impress upon them the value of peaceful resolution. It was a token invitation, extended as a gesture of inclusion, not because anyone expected the humans to contribute. Their role was simple: watch, learn, and understand the complexities of interstellar politics. But instead of attending the mediation process as expected, the humans did something no one could have predicted. They declined. Their message was short, unadorned, and delivered in the form of a simple text transmission, one that stood in stark contrast to the multi-sensory displays typically favored by other species. The message was direct, almost curt: we don't do that. At first, the council thought it was a misunderstanding. Surely the humans hadn't meant to refuse such a foundational aspect of galactic diplomacy? Perhaps they hadn't understood the importance of the process? But as the situation unfolded, it became clear that this wasn't a mistake. The humans weren't participating, and they weren't offering any explanation. Their refusal was final. The Suar mediator, a species known for their calm and translucent bodies, glowing softly with shifting hues, reached out to clarify. "What exactly do you mean by 'don't do that'?" they asked, their voice a soft, calming resonance, but there was an edge of genuine confusion underlying the words. Ambassador Thorne didn't seem flustered by the question at all. They simply responded with their usual unshakable calm. "We don't mediate disputes that don't involve us directly. If the eel and the varan can't resolve their issues on their own, they can fight for it. We're not interested in sitting around while they argue over a rock." The reaction was immediate and incredulous. The Yal delegate, a being made of shifting gelatinous membranes, quivered with indignation, their form pulsing with agitation. "Fight for it? That's barbaric. Mediation is the foundation of interstellar peace. It's what holds the galaxy together." Thorne, as ever, didn't flinch, their voice as steady as ever. "Your principles are yours, not ours. We're here to observe, not interfere." The simplicity of their words hit the council like a cold wind. The humans had no interest in the rituals of diplomacy, no interest in the formalized processes that were meant to maintain peace. They weren't here to follow the rules. They were here to watch, to see how things worked. And if those things didn't work, they were willing to leave them to their own devices. With that, the humans quietly removed themselves from the discussion entirely, refusing to participate in a process they didn't believe in. It was officially recorded as a misunderstanding, but privately, it sparked whispers of concern. a species that refused to engage in the most fundamental aspect of galactic cooperation. It was unprecedented. To some, it was a sign of arrogance. To others, a warning. A species that wouldn't follow the protocols, that wouldn't participate in the slow, methodical dance of galactic diplomacy, might be the very thing the Council feared most, a force that acted independently. And that was something the galaxy had never faced before. The humans had made a point that would resonate far beyond that single, seemingly inconsequential event. The galaxy was beginning to realize these humans weren't just observers, they were something entirely different. Part 4. The Exari Incident. Then came the event that would change everything. The spark that ignited a powder keg that had been simmering for millennia. The Exari Empire, infamous for their brutal conquests, announced yet another campaign of aggression. The Exari, a ruthless and technologically advanced species known for their merciless expansion, had set their sights on the Litharia, an ethereal, fragile species composed of glass-like beings. The Litharia had long relied on the protection of the Galactic Council, who had promised to defend them against aggressors. But this time, the Council's response was predictably slow. Resolutions were drafted, debated, amended, and calls for a peacekeeping coalition were sent out. Days turned into weeks, and the Exari war fleets continued their relentless march, carving a path through Litharia space with ruthless efficiency. The Litharia sent out desperate pleas for aid, begging for the Council to act, but the response from the Council was feeble at best. Their slow, bureaucratic nature was never more evident than in this crisis, where lives hung in the balance. Then, without warning, the humans acted. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't seek approval or diplomatic consent. Instead, a single human vessel appeared in Exari space. It was a stark contrast to the magnificent ships of the Council's more powerful races. It wasn't sleek or elegant like the Silthar's floating bioships, nor was it adorned with the organic intricacy of the Keelok's biocrafts. The human ship was simple, angular, utilitarian, and made with minimal flourish. It wasn't designed for beauty or awe. It was designed for purpose. The humans broadcast a brief, direct message to the Exari fleet. Cease your attack. Withdraw from Litharia territory immediately. The Exari High Warlord, an imposing figure draped in thick bioceramic armor, laughed at the demand. His arrogance was legendary, and the thought of a lone human ship challenging his mighty fleet seemed absurd. He responded with mockery, transmitting a message of his own to the entire sector. The soft skins dare to challenge us? We will crush you, as we have crushed the Litharia. Then, the Exari opened fire. What happened next was something none of us had ever seen before. Part 5. The Power of the Humans. The Exari unleashed a barrage of plasma missiles, kinetic projectiles, and destructive energy pulses, overwhelming firepower capable of obliterating a small moon. To anyone watching, the outcome seemed certain. The lone human ship would be reduced to dust in seconds. But that didn't happen. When the dust cleared, the human vessel was still there, hovering calmly amidst the wreckage of the Exari's first wave of attacks. Its shields, if they could even be called shields, had absorbed the entire onslaught. No flicker of distress, no signs of weakening. The ship remained motionless, utterly unaffected. The human response was swift, silent, precise, and utterly devastating. The human ship fired a single shot. The Exari fleet did not explode in the conventional sense. No violent detonations, no bright flashes. The fleet disintegrated. The massive Exari warships crumbled into dust, their molecular bonds unraveling in an instant, as if their very existence had been undone. It wasn't just destruction, it was absolute obliteration. Precise. Unfathomable. A destruction that left no room for recovery. The Exari High Warlord, stunned and furious, attempted to rally his remaining forces, trying to pull together what was left of his fleet. But it was too late. In less than 10 minutes, the once mighty Exari warfleet was gone, reduced to cosmic debris. The invasion was over. 4. Part 6. The Council's Response. The aftermath of the Exari incident sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. Species that had once dismissed the humans as insignificant, primitive even, were now scrambling to reassess their assumptions. The obliteration of the Exari fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Even the Thalas, a race whose energy-based technology was considered among the most advanced in the galaxy, admitted they could not replicate such precision destruction. It was beyond their understanding. For the first time in centuries, the council was afraid. The once lively council chambers, filled with the confident chatter of delegates from various species, now buzzed with whispers of fear, uncertainty, and disbelief. The humans had done what no one had thought possible. They had shattered not just a war fleet, but the very illusion of control that the council had maintained for millennia. It was clear now, the humans didn't adhere to the same rules as the rest of the galaxy. They didn't follow the same methods of diplomacy or politics. Their actions spoke volumes about their capabilities, an unfathomable power that could disrupt the delicate balance the council had so carefully maintained. The humans must be contained, the Sylar delegate declared in an emergency session, their glowing form flickering erratically, a clear sign of distress. Their voice trembled with a mix of fear and resolve. They acted without authorization. They have undermined everything we stand for: cooperation, diplomacy, balance. The Zion delegate, their crystalline body pulsating faintly in uncertainty, spoke up. But they saved the Letharia. Without their intervention, the Letharia would no longer exist. At what cost? The Sylar delegate snapped back, their voice rising with panic. What happens when they decide we are the problem? What happens when they turn those weapons on us? The council chamber erupted into heated debate. Accusations and counter-arguments flew like plasma bolts across the room. The Varan delegate, a towering insectoid being clad in glistening chitinous armor, expressed concern about the humans' apparent immunity to advanced energy attacks. The Xian delegate, with their ever-changing crystalline body, voiced alarm at the humans' adaptability, how they seemed to thrive under seemingly impossible odds without hesitation or fear. Even the normally stoic Yal delegates, who had spent millennia as observers of galactic power dynamics, admitted an uneasy sense of dread. The humans, with a single ship, had taken down an entire fleet in minutes. How had they done it? How had they broken through every defense? The Exari fleet was one of the most formidable military forces in the galaxy, yet it had been obliterated without so much as a fight. The Council's carefully curated order was crumbling before their eyes, and in its place stood an uncertain future, one in which the humans held the power to reshape everything. In the midst of this chaos, the humans remained eerily calm. Their delegation, led by Ambassador Thorn, sat silently in their assigned seats, never flinching as the debates raged around them. They were not moved by the anger, nor by the fear that swirled through the chamber. Their silence was like a still lake in the middle of a storm, unruffled, unyielding, and somehow more ominous for it. And then, when the council could no longer contain its outrage, when the debate reached a boiling point, Ambassador Thorn was called to the center of the chamber to explain their actions. "You acted without council authorization," the Sylar delegate began, their voice reverberating with authority and anger. "You violated our protocols, endangered our stability, and displayed a recklessness that cannot be tolerated. Explain yourselves." Thorn's response was as simple and chilling as ever. "You weren't going to act," they said calmly. "We did." It wasn't defiance nor arrogance. It was the voice of a species that had seen enough inaction to know when words were no longer enough. The simplicity of the statement reverberated in the chamber, leaving the delegates stunned and speechless. Part 7. The Challenge of the Humans. Throughout the chaos that engulfed the Galactic Council, the humans remained eerily silent. Their delegation, led by Ambassador Thorn, attended every session, but they did not engage in the mounting debates or rising tempers. As the other delegates grew more agitated and frustrated, Thorn sat quietly in their assigned seat, their expression unreadable, a calm that contrasted sharply with the storm brewing around them. It was as if the rising tension in the chamber held no significance to them, as if they had already accepted the outcome of the debate long before it had even begun. In the center of the room, the other delegates couldn't help but feel their frustration building. The humans' implacable presence, their refusal to either defend or explain their actions, was maddening. The Council had never encountered a species so unbothered by their disapproval, a species that was neither intimidated nor swayed by the long-standing traditions of galactic diplomacy. Finally, the Council's frustration reached a boiling point. A motion was introduced to formally reprimand the humans and demand an explanation for their actions. The room was thick with tension as the motion passed, and Ambassador Thorn was called to the center of the chamber to face the entire council. Every eye in the room, from the shimmering Zion delegate to the glowing Sylar, was fixed upon Thorn. Every sensory organ was trained to detect the slightest sign of weakness, the faintest hint of hesitation, but none came. Thorn stood unshaken, their gaze calm and unblinking. "You acted without council authorization," the Sylar delegate began, their voice reverberating with indignation. Their normally calm, shimmering form now flickered erratically, reflecting the turmoil within. "You violated our protocols, endangered our stability, and displayed a recklessness that cannot be tolerated. Explain yourselves." Thorn's response was maddeningly simple, delivered in their usual tone of unwavering calm. "We acted because no one else would," they said, their voice neither apologetic nor defiant. "The Letharia called for help. You debated. We responded." "That is not how the council operates," the Zion delegate shot back, their crystalline form pulsing brighter with frustration. "You cannot act unilaterally. There are processes for these things." "Maybe it should be," Thorn replied, their voice devoid of malice, but carrying a weight that silenced the room. "Diplomacy has its place, but sometimes action is required. You talk about principles while people die. We prefer to save lives, not arguments." The truth in Thorn's words hung heavy in the room. It was a stark, undeniable statement of fact. For all the council's grand discussions about peace and unity, when it came time to act, they had failed. The humans had succeeded where the council had faltered. The Letharia had begged for help, and instead of waiting for endless debates, the humans had stepped in and taken action. And yet, despite the clarity of Thorn's argument, this simple truth only deepened the council's unease. The humans weren't seeking power. They weren't demanding dominion. They had no grand ambitions of ruling the galaxy. They had acted out of a fundamental difference in perspective. They refused to stand idle while others suffered. This was a viewpoint the council had never encountered before, one that threatened the very foundation of their existence. The humans were a challenge, not just to the Exari or the Letharia, but to the entire way the council had maintained its power for millennia. They were a species that didn't rely on consensus, diplomacy, or elaborate processes. They simply acted when needed, regardless of the consequences, regardless of the protocols. The council had been built on a foundation of slow, deliberate action, and now it was being confronted by a force that didn't wait for approval. The implications were vast, and the council didn't know how to handle a species that had no interest in playing by the rules. Part 8. The Military Exercises. In the wake of the Exari incident and the humans' defiant stance, fear began to take hold within the council. The humans had proven themselves to be a powerful, unpredictable force, one that couldn't be easily controlled or contained. The fear wasn't just about their power. It was about what the humans represented, a species willing to bypass the delicate political systems the council had spent millennia building. They were, to put it bluntly, a wild card. Desperate to understand the scope of the humans' capabilities and to contain their influence, the council devised a plan. What they publicly framed as an olive branch, a gesture of goodwill, was in reality a calculated move to assess the humans as a threat. The plan: joint military exercises. The council invited the humans to participate in a series of exercises meant to foster cooperation, strengthen alliances, and most importantly, test the human military capabilities. Official invitations were sent to the humans and to the other member species, carefully worded to emphasize unity, shared learning, and peacekeeping. Most council members expected the humans to decline, given their apparent disdain for council processes and their disinterest in ceremonial displays of cooperation. But to everyone's surprise, the humans accepted without hesitation. The exercises were set on a barren, uninhabited moon in neutral space, a desolate wasteland of rock and craters that served as an ideal environment for simulated combat scenarios. Fleets from 5 council species arrived, each fielding their most advanced war machines and elite soldiers. The Sylar deployed their shimmering energy web drones, delicate yet deadly constructs capable of overwhelming enemies with pulses of concentrated energy. The Xions brought their crystalline infantry, nearly impervious to conventional weapons, with their advanced defensive capabilities. The Varans, massive insectoid beings, sent their towering armored beasts, each one carrying squads of soldiers designed for frontline combat. And then there were the humans. When the human ship landed, it drew curious glances and skeptical murmurs from the assembled forces. Instead of a fleet of warships or even a battalion of soldiers, the humans disembarked with just 12 individuals. 12. Not a single tank, no war mechs, no drones, just a handful of humans in lightweight, basic armor. Their weapons appeared primitive compared to the energy cannons and plasma rifles carried by their counterparts. Whispers rippled through the gathered forces. "They must be joking," one officer muttered. 12 soldiers against entire battalions? The other species couldn't help but underestimate the humans. They assigned them to the weakest position in the exercise, expecting them to be eliminated quickly, a predictable outcome in such a large-scale combat simulation. The humans, they assumed, would observe the inevitable defeat and learn their place. But what happened instead was nothing short of chaos. Wordsworth's Scormon, Part 9, Part 9, The Battle That Shook the Galaxy. The exercise began with a standard capture-and-hold scenario, where the teams were tasked with taking control of a specific zone on the barren moon. The humans were placed in the weakest position, on the edge of the zone, where they were expected to be easily eliminated by the superior numbers of their opponents. But instead of retreating, instead of falling back as expected, the humans fought with a ferocity and efficiency that no one had anticipated. While the other species relied on overwhelming firepower and elaborate, calculated strategies, the humans used the terrain to their advantage. They disappeared into craters, using the natural geography of the moon to conceal their movements. When they struck, it was quick and devastating, precise, devastating attacks that left no room for retaliation. The Sylar's energy drones were shredded by bullets that moved faster than the drones could react. The Xian infantry, once thought to be impervious to conventional weaponry, fell to explosives that shattered their crystalline forms. The Varans, massive armored beasts, were taken down with calculated shots to their weak points, places only the humans seemed to know. It wasn't just the power of their weapons, it was their ability to adapt, to think on their feet, and to operate independently yet seamlessly. Each human soldier moved with incredible coordination, as if they were extensions of one another, anticipating each move before it happened. When one of them was injured, they didn't retreat, they fought harder, using their injuries as fuel for their drive. Their resilience was uncanny, unnatural even. By the end of the exercise, the humans were the last ones standing, victorious in a battle that had seemed impossible. They had dismantled the entire exercise, exposing weaknesses in the strategies and tactics of every participating species. Part 10. The Truth of the Humans. When questioned about their actions in the wake of the military exercises, Ambassador Thorne offered no apologies. In the face of all the scrutiny, all the condemnation from the Council, they remained composed, their voice steady and unshaken. "We were told to participate," Thorne said simply, their words cutting through the tension with surgical precision. "We did." It was a statement so devoid of pretense, so matter-of-fact, that it left the Council delegates scrambling for words. They had wanted to test the humans, to probe their abilities and assess whether they were truly a threat. And now they had their answer, one that would haunt the Council for a long time. The fallout from the joint exercises was immediate and explosive. The Galactic Council, once a bastion of carefully maintained order and calculated diplomacy, found itself in chaos. The humans had shattered the illusion of control that had kept the galaxy in balance for millennia. The other species that had watched the exercise, from the sleek Silthar to the towering Varan, all returned to their respective governments with alarming reports. The humans weren't just powerful, they were something entirely different, a force that defied the galaxy's understanding of warfare, resilience, and coordination. Whispers of conspiracy began circulating within the council chambers. How could a species so seemingly unremarkable, without natural armor or the advanced technology of other civilizations, possess such overwhelming combat capabilities? Some speculated that the humans had hidden alliances with ancient, forgotten powers, their strength bolstered by something beyond their own understanding. Others wondered if they had uncovered lost technologies from a precursor civilization, some long-buried artifact that could explain their extraordinary power. But the truth, as it turned out, was far simpler and far more unsettling. The humans had evolved on a death world. Their home planet Earth was a chaotic environment of extremes. Unpredictable weather, relentless predators, natural disasters, and diseases that would have wiped out most other species. Where other civilizations had grown in harmony with their worlds, the humans had fought theirs tooth and nail. They weren't stronger, faster, or more durable than their adversaries. Instead, they had learned to outthink them, to endure the unbearable, and to push beyond limits that should have been insurmountable. What made them so dangerous wasn't their technology, it was their nature. Their ability to adapt, to overcome, and to survive in the harshest of environments was ingrained in every fiber of their being. They didn't need the Council. Their history had taught them that survival didn't depend on alliances or treaties, but on their own ability to endure and overcome any obstacle that stood in their way. And that was the truth the Council feared most. Part 11. The Council's Reckoning. The Council sat in stunned silence, a rare and heavy stillness settling over the Grand Hall. The weight of Thorn's words hung in the air like a storm about to break. The humans were not just another species, they were something entirely new. And for the first time in its long history, the Council had no answers. "We don't want power," Thorn had said, their voice calm but resolute. "We don't need dominion. We're here because the galaxy is broken, and we refuse to stand by and watch it fall apart." That was the core of the human resolve. There were no grand aspirations for control or fame, no desire to dominate the stars. The humans wanted only one thing: to prevent the galaxy from crumbling under the weight of its own stagnation. In their simplicity, they had brought with them a terrifying truth. A truth the Council had ignored for too long. The delegates exchanged uneasy glances, their murmurs barely audible over the hum of the energy fields. They could no longer dismiss the humans as insignificant. Their presence, their undeniable strength, had shattered the illusion of the Council's authority. Now, the galaxy would have to reckon with them. The Zion delegate, their crystalline form pulsing with uncertainty, was the first to speak after a long pause. "What now? What is to become of us if we cannot trust the Council to act in time? Are the humans the solution or the beginning of something worse?" The question hung in the air, as if the entire galaxy was waiting for an answer. Thorn's calm voice answered before the tension could overwhelm the chamber. "The solution is not one species or another. It's the willingness to act, to break free from the chains of inaction that bind this Council. We will work with you if you choose to stand with us, but we will no longer wait for you to decide." There was no response from the other delegates, only the silence of a broken system struggling to hold itself together. The Council was fractured, divided by its own inability to act when needed. And in the face of this failure, the humans stood as a stark contrast, a species that would not be paralyzed by debate, a species that would act to protect life, regardless of the consequences. Part 12. A New Era. The Galactic Council, once a symbol of unity and diplomacy, now stood at a crossroads. For the first time in its long history, it could no longer rely on the slow, methodical debates that had defined its existence. The humans had changed the rules of the game, and the galaxy would never be the same. The delegates dispersed, each species retreating to their own territories, their minds heavy with the implications of the humans' intervention. For the first time, the fate of the galaxy seemed uncertain. The humans had not declared war. They had not demanded dominion, but their actions had created a ripple effect that shook the very foundations of galactic order. Ambassador Thorn and their small delegation left the council chambers as quietly as they had arrived. They hadn't sought approval, nor had they tried to impose their will on the galaxy. They had simply done what they believed was right. And in doing so, they had left an indelible mark on the galaxy, a mark that would not fade easily. As the council convened again, this time with a new sense of unease, one thing became clear. The humans were not a threat to be destroyed. They were a force to be reckoned with. And if the galaxy wanted to survive, It would need to adapt to the humans' way of thinking, their way of acting, of confronting challenges head on. But the question lingered in the air like a shadow. Could the galaxy, with all its histories, politics, and divisions, evolve in time? Or would it crumble under the weight of its own inaction, just as the humans had predicted? For the first time, the future of the galaxy was uncertain. But one thing was for sure: the humans were here to stay, and the galaxy would have to learn to live with them, whether it liked it or not.